In this section, I will draft the sleeve and the collar. I'm writing the front armhole measurement, which is 10 inches. It's written in the armhole space of the front body pattern. And then I'm also going to write down the back armhole measurement, 10 7/8 inches. And I'm writing the front is on the right side, the back is on the left side of the paper. I'm taking both armhole measurements and adding them. So 10 and 10 7/8 is 20 7/8. I'm taking the tape measure and folding it in thirds. In other words, you take the front and the back armhole measurement, add them together, and divide by 3. You can round up to the next number if you choose to. Starting with a line at the very top, that will be my shoulder line. The cap height number that I came up with is 7 inches. So from that shoulder line down, I'm going to mark a line parallel to the shoulder line, 7 inches down. That is my cap height. It is also the bicep line. I had measured on Morgan's arm from the shoulder down the outside of her arm to the elbow, which was 13 inches, and I'm going to add another 7 inches so that it will be a 3/4 sleeve. At the very top of the shoulder line in the middle, I'm making a red dot or a short line. That will be my shoulder notch. That notch will be at the top of the sleeve connecting to the shoulder seam of the blouse. Put the ruler at 0 at the top shoulder line and find 10 on the bicep line and draw a straight line. Do the same on the left side using 10 7/8. Now, on each of those straight lines, find the midpoint and come down 1 inch. And make a little cross mark. That will be a notch. The same on the left side, which is the back armhole measurement. Find the midpoint . Come down 1 inch and another 1/2 inch, making 2 notch marks. These notches are the transitions from the overarm to the underarm curves. As you see, I'm setting my curved ruler at the top shoulder line, intersecting the first notch, and then an underarm curve, either with that ruler that you can flip around or the clear one that I'm using. I'm using the clear one so you can see both curves at the same time. And repeating the same process on the back or the left side. As you notice, this curve is intersecting to the second red notch down, and then an underarm curve. Both underarm curves stop where the original diagonal line was drawn. Now right now I'm just coming up about halfway and measuring across. As you can see, that's a pretty wide area, and that goes across the arm about 3 or 4 inches down from the shoulder. Just checking the width. Now I'm checking the width of the bicep line. Now to measure those new curved lines. And what happens is, when you first start with the straight diagonal line, the front was 10, the back was 10 7/8, and when you curve them, it creates the ease. And I'm writing down the ease, which is 5/8 of an inch. That's a perfect amount for a sleeve like this. And measuring the back, comparing it to the original measurement of 10 7/8. And the back also has 5/8 of an inch ease. As we work through this course, I will talk to you about how to adjust the ease and such if you're not completely happy with it. I'm finding the middle point of the bicep line, and that will be our length grain. It's perpendicular to the bicep, which is also the cross grain. Once I draw this, you'll notice that the length grain line does not intersect the shoulder notch, and that is because the back armhole measurement is longer than the front. We will determine the bottom of the sleeve from this length grain. In other words, if it's 11 inches, it will be 5.5 inches on either side of the length grain, the middle of the sleeve. Normally a jacket would be 10 or 12 inches around the cuff, so I'm going to make this one 11. 5.5 inches on either side of the length grain line. Now first I'm going to draw a light straight line from the bicep to the bottom of the sleeve, but I really don't want too much fullness right under the bicep, so I'm going to make it a curved line. Note where the ruler starts, the number on the ruler, so that when you flip it to the other side, it will be the same exact curve. I'm adding 3/4 of an inch seam allowance. Adding 1/2 of an inch around the cap. I'm going to show you an easy way to copy the curved underarm seam to the other side. Keep in mind, the right and left side of the cap are two different shapes. I'm matching the two underarm seams excluding seam allowance. So basically I'm folding down the length grain line and the bicep line is on top of each other, left and right side. And cut the side seams. It's a good idea to stabilize them first with some straight pins. Remembering that I'm going to add a cuff, I don't want to chop the whole bottom off, so I'm going to leave a little excess paper somewhere. Adding the underarm seam notches, the shoulder seam. I'm extending these into the seam allowance, into the edge of the seam allowance, and extending the curved, the underarm curve notches. The back has two and the front has one. I'm going to make this cuff 1 3/4 inches wide. The bottom fold, what I'm folding up now, is actually the bottom of the sleeve. Now I'm creating the cuff. Now you can see the cuff. Of course, I will cut the excess paper away in a moment, but first, let's shape this cuff. When it's folded up, it needs a little room to stand away from the sleeve, just a little. So I'm going to give it about 1/8 of an inch more width. This is where I give it the 1/8 of an inch, right there, and then it comes back to 0. 1/8 at the top fold and back to the original sleeve, including seam allowance at the bottom. Flip it over, and this on the inside will be the hem. And I'm going to give that 1.5. I like the hem to be a little bit shorter than the cuff so that it doesn't show when the garment's being worn. Sometimes the stitching of the hem will show through, so if the hemline is under the folded cuff, it's less likely to be apparent. This is the bottom hemline. And below that is all the cuff, including the cuff hem. Putting notches on the fold lines. And filling in seam allowance. And now to mark where I want the slit in the bottom cuff. It will not go into the hem of the cuff, but it will go in to both of the upper fold pieces. So I'm following the grain line, and right where the second fold is, I'm making a diagonal that is about 3/16 of an inch on either side. It's a diamond shape. This will make a lot more sense when I go to sew it. And now to create a collar. I'm measuring the back neck, excluding seam allowance, measuring from the shoulder to center back. This back neck is 3 3/4 inches. The front of the collar will stop 1 inch before center front. And this creates a notched collar. The first button will start about 6 inches down. That's a little above her apex level. I'm putting notches on both sides so that the facing has a notch just like the outside, and that's where the collar stops. Now this folded area, that will be my fold line, and also the lapel. I'm measuring, excluding seam allowance, from the shoulder to the notch where the collar stops. Four and 3/8 inches, and that's from the shoulder to that notch. And now to create the collar. This is a convertible collar. It does not have two pieces. It's made from one piece of fabric. To determine the size paper that you need to make your collar pattern, take your front and back neck measurements, multiply them times 2, add about 3 inches, and that is the length of the paper. For the height of the paper, take the height of the collar and multiply it times 4 and add about 1.5 inches for seam allowance. The folded edge is center back. I'm going to create a line, leaving a little of the paper below the line, and this line is perpendicular to the center back fold. From that fold, you'll come over the length of the back neck. The back neck measurement I'm using is 3 3/4. Depending on the weight of the fabric you're using, you can add 1/8 inch to that measurement as well as the front neck measurement for a little ease in that collar. For heavier fabrics, we might even add more. I made a little dot, and that will be a notch. From that dot, I'm coming over the front neck measurement. That measurement is 4 3/8 inches, and I'm coming up 1/2 inch. The front is going to be on a curve, and you start that curve in the middle of the front neckline measurement. Because the neck is a cylindrical shape, you need a curve in the collar to go around the neck. And now to draw a line 2.5 inches parallel to the bottom line. This will be the folded edge of the collar. When the blouse is being worn and the collar is turned down, the height will be 1 1/4 inches, which is 1/2 of this 2.5 inch measurement. This is the point of the collar. It is at about a 45-degree angle from the curved up point. And this again, I will test on the model. I'll see if this is a good shape for her, and it can easily be changed, the pattern adjusted before I cut the fabric. Seam allowance, 1/4 inch, and the top line will be folded. I'm stabilizing the 2 layers of paper before I fold. Make sure that those 2 folded edges match perfectly. And what you really see now is quarters, 4 quarters that make up an entire pattern for the convertible collar. Notching where that little dot is that I created, where the back and front neck measurements come together. And that will be at the shoulder seam of the garment. And now you can see it looks more like a collar. Transferring the notches to both sides. This is the center back. And also the length grain. I've chosen to cut the collar with the length grain going down the center back so that there's a little more give in the fabric going around the neck. Filling in the seam allowances. I'll be cutting one out of the fabric and interfacing it. Notches at the fold of the collar. So we have a sleeve, collar, bodice front, and bodice back. Sleeve, cut 2. Our model's name. Blouse front, cut 2. Checking notches, there's a notch at center front and the fold line, and then center front on the facing side. And of course the notch where the collar starts. Notches at the bust start, Armhole notches. The ease of the sleeve is in the upper part of the cap, perhaps 3 inches on either side of the shoulder notch. Checking notches. I see that the notches in the armhole of the back of the blouse are missing. So let's review how to establish the notches. Excluding seam allowance, I'm going to measure from the underarm of the sleeve in the back up to the first and second notches. My measurement, 4.5 and 5 inches. On the blouse back, starting at the same place, the underarm excluding seam allowance, measure up 4.5 and 5 inches, put a dot and extend those dots into the seam allowance to create notches. And those notches are perpendicular to the seam allowance. And copy them to the other side. And now to sew a muslin to try on our model.